Welcome to my review of Wayne's World for the NES. And this is another shitty game by THQ. THQ is kind of like the equivalent of LJN as far as the quality of their games, especially during the 8-bit era. You know, they started to get some better games throughout the years, like Lawnmower Man for the Super Nintendo is a pretty good game. And, you know, of course, later games and stuff, like nowadays, they put out a lot of racing games and stuff like that that are pretty high quality, but around this time, THQ was just putting out a lot of shit. So this is definitely one of them. The control is really delayed, really laggy. It's almost like halfway between, you know, Prince of Persia or Blackthorn and a regular action game. You know, it's not quite as sluggish as something like, you know, Prince of Persia, but those games are overly animated, cinematic type of games, you know, out of this world, etc. You know, of course, it's not that fucking sluggish, but it's bad for an action game. And when you take any kind of jump that's a little bit too far, you get stuck on the ground, almost like you're taking damage. But I don't think it hurts you. But you get staggered, and then you'll take damage from enemies because you can't move. So that boss is very shitty. That's the first boss, and you just kick out the wrecker. It's very simple, but the hit detection is horrible. Even on this part, this little bonus stage, it's very hard to get on all the platforms to grab all these things because of how bad the control is. So I didn't even bother trying to get the extra lives by grabbing all these things, because you can get an extra life if you grab all of them and leave, I believe. But I didn't even try to learn that because it plays so shitty. So yeah, I'm going to be highlighting, you know, basically I'm going to show everything in the game that's worth showing for a review. You know, it's a very short game at around 17 minutes, but it took me around an hour and 54 minutes to beat. You know, it's both very easy for an NES game on one hand, but on the other side of it, it's still like kind of a hard and frustrating game because it just has those areas, you know, where you can die a lot because of how bad it plays. So it's kind of like easy and hard at the same time. It's easy in the fact that there's not a lot of NES games that I can beat in under 2 hours because they tend to be pretty damn hard. But, you know, on the flip side of that, the reason it's hard is only because it plays like shit. You know, then you have sequences like this. You basically alternate between the two characters, I think Wayne and Garth. And, you know, Garth has like I don't even know what the name, I think that's the name, but he has just a gun. You know, so you just slowly proceed with the gun and try to shoot everything. It's very simple stages with that character. As you saw in the first stage, I just rode this drum through the stage. And then, which is very simple. And then, these stages can be harder with this character. He gets the harder stages because he only has a kick. And you see you get staggered when you take a jump to that platform because it's too far. And then you get hit by all the bullshit. So it's one of those kind of games. You can kind of, you know, you can see what I'm talking about a little bit. These are some of the hardest sections that I highlighted, and this was kind of the area like the run killer for me. This particular checkpoint, because you got to go through this little area and not lose too much health, which is easy enough. But then when you're jumping past all these spiders, you know, it's very easy to get hit by some shit with the floaty controls. Really bad hit detection. There's also some parts that are hard to predict. There's one jump that's kind of hard to predict with this droplet where if you don't scrape by just in time, you'll get knocked into the hole, of course. Now, a lot of the enemies, the so-called bosses of the game, you can stand there and, if you get your spacing right, just rapidly kick them, which I'm going to break down in the tutorial. I'm also going to be recording a tutorial commentary for this, for my playthrough, which I will link the tutorial version in the review description. So here this part continues. This is part of the same checkpoint from the part where I was kicking those things that kept coming at me. This is all one checkpoint, basically. You have 4 lives to beat the game. You can get 1-ups in those bonus stages if you want to learn how to grab all those fucking donuts or whatever the fuck they are, which I didn't bother doing. But there's no continue, so... but it's a short game. It's just, you know, I recommend using save states in an emulator to practice these sections, especially the later sections, because you want to make sure you got it down. Otherwise, it can take you a lot longer because you won't have a lot of time to practice and you'll have to start the game over again and again. So it's just a sloppy game, you know, and when you play it, you'll understand, but it's sloppy. It feels thrown together, even the enemy placement. Like, I mean, this kind of feels like a fuck show, right? I mean, there's shit floating everywhere while you're just trying to jump on the platforms. It doesn't feel like there's any real rhyme or reason to it. It kind of just feels like they just threw a bunch of shit on the stage, basically. So, I mean, it feels very sloppy. There's this shit that's there to annoy you, like the cats jumping into you while this other bullshit is everywhere. And, of course, the bad controls. So, this game is going to end up... Well, here's the final boss. I'll show this first. This is the final boss. All you got to do is try to lure him to an area where there's no platform so that he doesn't, like, fall down on you. So I did it a little sloppy in the beginning here, but you want to try to lure him to a open area, basically. It makes it easier. And then all you got to do is keep kicking, and he's going to just get stun locked. That's it. Game over, motherfucker. You beat the game. So that's it. I actually watched a tutorial of the game before I started playing it. And, the game looked like it would be an easy kill. I knew it was going to be shitty, but I figured it would be a relatively easy kill. So that's really all there is to the game. Now I'm going to give this game a 3 out of 10. A similar, if I were to compare to another game that I reviewed really low, was Gym Power for the Super Nintendo, which I did a tutorial. Probably one of the hardest Super Nintendo games, and not a good game at all. But the reason I put this one a point lower than that game, which I gave a 4 out of 10, was because at least that game had some cool shit in it. It controlled a hell of a lot tighter, even though the game was a fuck fest. At least it had tighter control in most of the stages where you're walking. It had more variety of different types of gameplay, even though, again, it still sucked. I had more content. This game, it's very short, but it wouldn't be a huge problem if it wasn't for how bad it was. I guess in that case, it's good that it's a short game, but not something I would give an extra point for. Now, of course, Gym Power had the spaceship levels, which played like shit with the huge floaty ship and the huge hitbox. So those levels were on par with something like this, but overall, that game controlled a little better. This game is even worse. It's a few points below mediocre, definitely. So let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.